Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. We have part 2 of the Donald Odomes case. Donald Odomes was sent to prison in the 80s for a sexual assault crime that he said he never committed. Donald Odomes, thank you for agreeing to come back and telling part 2 of your very interesting, complicated, sad life. And Danny Sneed, my usual co-host, came in. He's the one that found Mr. Odomes and invited him to the show to tell his story for one of the groups that he participates in. It's a very serious story, and one of the things we were so amazed about when we heard his part 1 of his story 2 weeks ago was that he wasn't broken. It was just so interesting to hear such a sad, complicated story from Mr. Donald Odomes, and he wasn't broken. Donald, we focused a lot about your case last week, and we want to get right into it this week. So when you found tell us about when you found yourself in this situation and how the court proceedings started, if you can get your mind back there. So I know Mr. Rush was your lawyer, and I know that you wanted witnesses to be, I know that you said that you weren't living in Houston anymore. You were living in another city when it happened, but yet witnesses who knew your whereabouts and knew where you were living were not called to testify in your trial. Did I get that part correct?
You got that correct.
So can you get your mind, I know it's a long time ago in the 80s, but can you get your mind back around the defense that you wanted to present and you weren't able to? And you thought, you basically knew who you thought did the crime. Tell your story.
Well, when it all come about and trial began, they actually called the crime man to come and...
The actual person you think committed the rape was actually a witness for the state of Texas?
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, he was a witness because Yarbrough, that was the head officer that was doing the case.
No, that was the investigating officer?
Yes, the investigating officer,
okay.
yes. And he called him to his office. Mm-hmm. And that's how...
That's when they were trying to solve the crime?
No.
Who was that?
No. He wanted Wilkins in there to give him somebody to work with.
Okay.
Anybody. No, he just wanted a body.
Okay.
But Wilkins took the stand, and he said this.
Wilkins is the person that you think
That's
did it?
the one did it. I know he did it.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. His fingerprints on the car and all that. He's the height and everything. Yes, ma'am, he
Right.
did it. So when they put him on the stand, they asked him a question. They said, did you write a statement against Donald Odomes? He said, no, I didn't. He said, he said, I didn't write the statement. If I wrote it, it wasn't a true statement. It wasn't true. No objection to that. Mr. Rush didn't object to that. No one did. And he actually admitted, I did this. I lied on that man. No one paid attention to it, though.
Wow. So did you ever before the trial started, did you ever see the statement did your lawyer show you the statement that Mr. Wilkins wrote?
No, he didn't.
Did he tell you what the statement said?
No, he didn't.
What do you think the statement said?
Well, the statement that he wrote, he said it wasn't real. It wasn't a true statement.
But you don't know what the statement
No,
contained?
Evidently, the statement said that I was driving to some color of a car, and his hands must have leaned on it, and that's how his fingerprints got on the car.
Okay.
This is what I heard, something that he said. But then
Now remind us again why you got charged with this crime.
I'm going to remind you that Wilkins was kind of upset with me because he broke in his sister's house and stole a stereo and her children's stuff, and she was kind of angry. And her and my, it used to be fiance, was very good friends. And he got mad at me because I told her, no, he broke in your house. So I guess he felt like, okay, I will get you one day. And that's why I brought some of the papers here right now concerning, I hate I didn't bring the one where he got up there and admitted that, yes, I don't remember the statement because it wasn't true. It wasn't a true statement I said on Mr. Odomes. That should automatically draw the case from me.
But did the lady who made the allegations testify that it was you?
Yes, she had twice to do that.
Okay.
What happened is that I had a forgery case.
A forgery?
A forgery, yeah, way back. And he showed her a photo of me. And that's what I was talking about in the third position. And he did another one.
Another photo spread?
Yes, ma'am, he did.
This is pictures or this is a live lineup?
No, he come and did another live lineup after he did that one. He had already placed me in the third place and showed her where I was and who I was. And then when he came to trial and he showed her, he also did it again.
Okay.
He put me from the second place back to the third place. He come rearrange what Rush had already made. I don't know if they was doing this together or what, but Mr. Rush had already placed me where he wanted me at.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Okay, here he comes. Okay, you move over here, you move over there, and you move over here. And that's what happened.
Now, were
So she
everybody in the lineup the same height?
No,
And your height is what?
5'3".
5'3". And the perpetrator's height was reported as what?
5'6", 5 something, 5'6" or 5'9".
5'6" or 5'9"?
Yes, ma'am. He had some height on him.
Okay. And one of the things we did to kind of show your height was you and I took a picture together, and I'm 5'3" also. And so I just kind of wanted to show that picture. So we're about the same height.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm 5'3.5", but you know, who's counting? Anyway, so we're about the same height, and that's a big deal. That's a big difference. And this was supposed to have happened in the same apartment complex where you once lived?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But you said that you had moved out of that apartment
Yes,
complex
yes,
and
we
moved
was
with your
gone.
wife to another little town. Where were you living?
That was in East Texas.
Okay.
You ever heard of Center, Texas?
I thought, oh, sure. Yes,
Oh,
Center
okay
Texas.
then.
Yeah, I
Oh,
have.
that's where I was at.
In Center, Texas.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
All right. And so you got arrested in Center, right?
No, ma'am.
Now, how did they get you back here?
Well, when I come back, we went to the apartment. And I forgot to tell you, but her daddy was staying there.
Okay.
And when we got back, he went on left. So like 4 weeks later, the police come there.
Right.
And they followed her from her job, because she go back to her job at Jack in the Box. So they followed her in a plain car. And when she come in, they come in behind her. And they told her that I was wanted for a sexual assault. She said, no, I got all this paperwork right here saying that. Everything is written right in here. She said, I know he didn't do this because he was married February the 15th, right after my uncle's birthday and his birthday. We were married with Judge Johnny Johnson downtown in Center, Texas. I told him, I said, okay. I said, Mr. Rush, she got the marriage certificate over there in her purse. Oh, no, that doesn't help. And
Wow.
that was his
Did you
attitude.
feel that he should have presented that
Yes, ma'am.
certificate?
Yes,
And your
ma'am.
wife to explain?
Yes, ma'am. That was on the same time the case happened. The same time this girl was at this shop or meat market, wherever she was. And plus, she also said something else when she took the stand.
Who, the lady?
Yeah, my lady, my woman.
Your woman, okay.
Okay, she said that I remember this so well because he wore a suit from Trees of Houston with a detail tag on it. And this was the same clothes that he wore when he did this attack on this girl. And she let them know this. And it's in this package right here, letting them know that man had on these clothes.
And what is
And he worked it down the
significance of
street
that?
from where it took place at. He worked at some kind of detail, some kind of shop where they was doing work on cars and stuff, but he had his uniform on. And she remembered that uniform.
Okay, so Wilkins had the uniform on.
Yes.
And so did he have that uniform on when he testified?
No, ma'am. No.
Okay. But
No,
when
he
did he
didn't.
have it on?
After this was over with.
So she'd seen him in the uniform?
Yes.
Okay, did that come out in the trial that the witness had the same clothes on?
It should have because it's in his paperwork. It should have came out because she told her that he had this uniform on. And she remembered the uniform all the way to the detail tag on it.
Wow.
And she said that during trial.
Wow. So that's something real big.
Yes.
Back in the 80s with DNA, DNA wasn't the DNA that we have today that exonerates
wasn't.
people. DNA,
true.
it only was blood typing.
Yes, ma'am. That's true.
What, and do you remember if the DNA was tested
Okay.
back in those days?
No, this is what they took her to the hospital and they swiped her and put it on a swipe. Now they gave this to the crime lab.
Right.
Okay? Now, they could have did the blood test.
Right.
It's something they didn't do because Frank Rush didn't ask for it. That's why they didn't do it.
And the prosecutor didn't ask for it?
No, the prosecutor didn't ask for the blood test either. So that puts me out there. No one answered for it. And it says in here that Barry Scheck said they could have did the blood test and they would have cleared you, period.
But they never did it.
No, ma'am, they never did a blood test.
So after being in prison for 20-something years, Barry Scheck takes on your case out of New York, the Innocence Project.
Yes, ma'am.
And but at that time, Barry Scheck finds out what? Tell the audience what he found.
Barry Scheck finds out that he meant to go, when he went to Houston, he came down here, and he went to Houston, and he was going to Houston to find out what happened to the evidence. What happened to the evidence that was there And it says I'm a law student working with Nina Morrison at the Innocence Project. I have been assigned your case and I'm in process of reviewing your files. But it goes on to tell you about the 280 boxes of lost evidence from some 8,000 cases. Now, why would you, this is right here. This is there. They should have, I don't know what.
Yeah, so basically you were fortunate enough to have Barry Scheck's Innocence Project look at this case, and this letter is written September 14, 2004.
Yes, ma'am.
And they had a law student, this is where you were in Darrington Unit, looking for it, and they let you know that they've discovered that evidence from 8,000 cases. As you may know, a recent internal police investigation at HPD has turned up 280 boxes of lost evidence in some 8,000 cases. We are working to determine if the evidence relevant to your case is included. I will keep you informed. Wow. And so they started investigating it and eventually discovered that the evidence has been destroyed. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. And what method did they say they destroyed it?
They said they did a spring cleaning. These three guys, Chuck Rosenthal, John Holmes, and the lab chemist, James Baldwin, they said that they did a spring cleaning. But you didn't do this until after Dallas started letting so many people out there were innocent. And I know Houston was watching this. So I guess to keep them from shame and to keep them undercover from what they did, this is what they came up with. Let's throw the evidence away.
Well, one of the things I see that the prosecutor wrote you back then, wrote your lawyer, Mr. Rios, this is Ms. Rios that's up in the Innocence Project, that the district attorney's office was not involved in the cataloging of evidence in the 280 boxes in HPD's possession. And so I guess the DA's office is trying, because I guess this Innocence Project lady is trying to check any source that she can to try to figure out where is this evidence.
That's what
and she's saying that the DA's office is saying, well, we don't catalog it. And it's true, evidence from an agency that gathers it, they're the ones that keep it.
Yes, ma'am.
Catalog it.
They do. Yeah, they I was still wondering why would they do it.
Okay, so they're saying that this rape occurred in February of 1984. And they said that you were originally identified as the perpetrator by a jailhouse informant whose own fingerprints were on the vehicle in which the rape occurred and who later recanted his testimony. So this guy was in jail when he told that you did it. Even more dramatically, there was unrebutted testimony at trial that Donald was 180 miles away from Houston when the rape occurred. He had recently moved with his new wife to Center, Texas, and during the time in question, he attended a birthday party for his wife's uncle, and then the uncle drove him to work in Center. If the 5 witnesses who testified to these facts are telling the truth, and there is no reason to think they are not, it would be impossible for him to have committed the rape. Donald was convicted only because of the victim's eyewitness identification of him, but as you know, scores of DNA cases have proved in the last decade that sometimes eyewitnesses can be honestly but utterly mistaken, especially when they are victims of severe trauma. So the Innocence Project in New York filed a Chapter 64 motion on Donald's behalf seeking DNA testing on the rape kit evidence 2 years ago. So they're writing this now in 2004. They started it in 2002. But unfortunately, the case was dismissed because officials could not find the evidence to be tested. The judge did, however, indicate that we could renew our motion if we ever found the evidence. Importantly, during those proceedings, we received an affidavit from the district clerk that she had destroyed all the exhibits in the case. But what was not listed on the destruction order was the rape kit, which contained the vaginal slides, swabs, and other items with semen, such as the victim's clothing. And the last known custody of that evidence was with the HPD crime lab in 1985. We have had a lot of cases we decided to close over the years because of lack of evidence, but this is one of the few we have kept open because the evidence of Donald's innocence seems so strong, and because we had some hope that given the HPD audits and ongoing reviews of their under new management, the evidence might somehow turn up Today's news seems may well to be an extraordinary break. We have been hoping for it this time. So would it be possible for you to put Mr. Odomes' case at the top of your list to be searched for the inventory? So they had hope that there was still evidence because some of it had turned up on this destruction order, and the destruction order did not include the rape kit, so they still had hope that they were going to find it 2 years later. But they never did. They never did find it. So the correspondents are saying that the pants, panties, socks, fingernail scrapings, and all of that, they couldn't find it. So HPD could not find the evidence, and from that, the Denver Post wrote an article talking about the questionable rape conviction stands for 23 years and counting, because they thought it was such an interesting article that in July 24th of 2007, the Denver Post wrote an article about this case. Wow. And you were 22 years old. Oh, when they wrote it, you were 22 years into a 65-year sentence for rape. He insists he did not commit. Wow, that's deep.
And that's his. I want you to see that one too, because I want you to see this.
So the Denver Post also talked about it.
Yes, ma'am. And they went out through the corridors and everything on that one. They tried to find it. They did their best to try to find it. Miss Nina Morrison and her associate did a great job. They did whatever they could to try to find that evidence for me.
Oh, yeah, no, these people at the Innocence Projects are true believers.
Yes,
for years, this is what the Denver Post says, family members and advocates for Donald Odomes have combed courthouse corridors and basements of vaults for exhibit number 11, the rape kit that helped send him to prison 23 years ago. May I say untested rape kit, only to come up empty, only to find boxes with case numbers falling digits short. It may only be preserved in Donald Odomes' memory. I can still see it in the DA's hand, says Odom, now serving his 23rd years behind bars in a South Texas prison. His lawyers say tests on the kit's DNA would betrust the story of family members who've always sworn they were with him more than 170 miles away when it happened. So did those 5 family members testify?
No, just one.
Just your wife.
He wouldn't subpoena him. Frank Westwood, I asked him. I asked him twice.
His ex-wife, Josie Odom, says, we were in East Texas. That is the only thing I know, and I stake my life on it. There's no ifs and maybes about it. We were in East Texas. I know this. On an official level, silence surrounds the case. The lead Houston police investigator, Ralph Yarborough, and the district attorney, Charles Rosenthal, refused to talk about it. The lab analyst, Jim Bolding, didn't return phone calls. The murky chain of events stretches back to February 2nd, 1984, when a Texas Health Department inspector pulled her Mercury Cougar into a parking lot of a meat plant, and a man with a knife forced his way in. He raped her a few blocks from the plant, took $50 from her purse, and drove away. The victim described to the police what she remembered. Her attacker was black, mustached, about 20 years old, 5'9", maybe 145 pounds. He wore a knit cap and a green work uniform.
Yes,
that's that uniform that you're
yes,
saying
yes,
Mr. Wilkins had. Though Odom was 23 and had a mustache, he stands about barely 5'3". At the hospital, nurses collected the rapist's semen by swabbing the victim's body. The specimens then were packaged in a rape kit to be analyzed by the Houston Crime Lab. Forensic tests at the time couldn't derive a rapist's genetic identity from his semen, only potentially his blood type. But in this case, the analyst didn't perform the blood test. That's what the report shows. The analyst Bolding eventually was forced to resign as head of Houston's lab after a spat of flawed analysis in unrelated cases, including one linked to the false conviction of a sex assault subject. And this is deep. This is real deep. I hate to read it, but it's just so good. The police didn't buy it and let him off in handcuffs. Yarborough then set up another lineup, arguably tainting the process by placing Odomes in the same third spot. The victim identified him a second time. Other questionable practices put Odomes on a fast track to prison. His defense attorney never investigated Wilkes and didn't investigate blood testing of the semen that may have excluded Odomes immediately. During trial, Odomes took the stand himself along with Josie and his uncle, Uncle Hatcher, all swearing that they were together the evening before the morning of the rape, but prosecutors dismissed their testimonies, arguing they were covering for each other. Perhaps the most dramatic testimony occurred when Wilkes took the stand. Do you recall what the statement you made? Now, he's the jailhouse snitch. Not really, because it wasn't a true statement. Wilkes said, it was a statement made against my will, really. So he's basically saying the cops forced him to do it. Wilkes went on to say that he had fingered Odomes only because Yarborough was pushing him, calling him at work and seeking a suspect's name to work with. Despite Wilkes' about-face and the lack of physical evidence, Odomes got 65 years in prison. The day that he was sentenced, they took everything that was good and made it bad, Josie said. Everything that was pure became rotten. That was what your wife said. By the 90s, Odomes at Darlington prison started hearing the buzz about DNA. He turned his mind to Exhibit 11. Help me find that rape kit, he wrote in letters to anyone who would listen. By 1998, he captured the interest of New York-based Innocence Project lawyer Nina Morrison and Vanessa Potkin. Another Potkin's first call to Yarborough, who she recalls told her that the kit had probably been destroyed, but he offered no other information, no proof. The protocol called for Harris County clerk and lab to store evidence after trial. For the next 9 years, the attorneys and up to 10 law students would hit only dead ends. Their letters to Odomes ended the same way. I'm truly sorry. Last January, the Denver Post searched the courthouse evidence rooms for the kit, also coming up empty. The only court records available on Odomes' case referred to a 2000 destruction of exhibits with no mention of Exhibit 11. They just didn't get the right guy, said Nick Barzokas, the lawyer who took over the case. Wow.
Can I interject something?
Of course you can.
Maybe people didn't watch the first show, but one thing, they offered you 15 years that you didn't have to take the 65 years. The reason you got 65 years is because you wouldn't plea to something that you believed, that you knew that you didn't do. And I learned that from the last time you was here. The difference between taking a 15 years sentence through a plea bargain would have meant that the most you would have spent in prison may have been 7.5 years under the law at that time.
Yes.
And that was on the table. And you knew at the time when you turned that down that you risked getting the type of time that you've gotten. But you stood on your truth and you took the risk that your truth would win out at the risk of spending a long time in prison. I've been to prison 3 times. And each time that I went to prison, I took a plea. Probably because each time I probably was guilty, but that's not the point. The point is, it takes a lot of courage to stand up to the criminal justice system the way it's built when you're innocent at the risk of spending the rest of your life in prison, potentially, when they offer you a caveat that we'll let you do a little time just to say you're guilty, even if we know you're innocent. But if you risk standing on your truth, the system is designed to punish you punitively by spending as much time as you spend in prison. So for the viewing artists, I want them to really look at what you was at risk. You didn't have to take 65 years. You didn't have to stand in your own defense. At one time, there was offered you a chance to walk away with a 15-year sentence, and you didn't take that.
I couldn't do that.
Because you didn't do it.
I couldn't do that.
And let me just tell you this. Let me just read how cold this is, and let's just hope our education here is that we never experience anything like this again and put people in jail for this. The Denver Post article starts, 4 days after the rape, Houston police found the victim's car. And on it, they had fingerprints of a career criminal named David Wilkes. He had recently paroled on a burglary conviction. The car had been ditched within blocks of Wilkes' employer, an auto repair shop. While Wilkes was black, mustached, 24 years old, 5'9", the exact height the woman said, and 140 pounds. Records indicate that Houston Police Sergeant Yarborough, the lead investigator, cleared him as a suspect almost immediately. Checked and learned that he does not fit the description Yarborough wrote without documenting how. When he's 5'9", like the woman said, and 140 pounds with a mustache. He did document how Wilkes walked into the police station eager to give Yarborough a name to work with, Donald Odomes, an acquaintance from Acres Homes in Houston, a poor section of town where they both grew up. Wilkes said he remembered seeing Odomes driving a white Cougar one afternoon in February. He said Wilkes' fingerprints must have rubbed off, my fingerprints must have rubbed off on the car while he leaned against it to talk to Odomes. So he's explaining why his fingerprints are on this car and letting this guy snitch. This whole case is based on what Wilkes said. So somebody can just walk in and do it and say that, oh, my fingerprints are on this random person's thing because he walked in and told the story first. While in February, this man, Odom, lived in another town and had witnesses he was in another town, at work in another town. That's cold. That's cold.
Do you think something like this can happen in today?
It won't happen under Kim Ogg. It won't happen under Vivian King. It won't happen with me. I mean, that's all I can tell you. If somebody comes in like this, we're going to have to get some more evidence. But thank God, a case like this, there would be DNA. And we have DNA tests that, this case has DNA. So you can do a specimen. You know what I mean? And any case like this in 2018, the DNA, we don't even proceed as prosecutors now unless the DNA has been examined, period. We require that it's examined. You see what I'm saying? The defense attorney doesn't have to ask for it. If there's DNA found at all, we test it before. I mean, the person might be in jail waiting for trial or something like that, but we're not going to proceed without it. So I can tell you that. That's what's different now than before. Before, the defense had to ask for it or somebody had to ask for it. We don't do that now.
May I say something?
Of course you can.
Does the Chapter 64 still exist?
Oh, yeah. And it appears from what the prosecutor said back then.
Yes, ma'am.
I wasn't a prosecutor back then, but when she said that if it ever comes up, they would still, it was dismissed, but it could be refiled if they can ever find it. But it appears that Barry Scheck's group kept it for several years and they never found it. But if it exists, yes. Yeah, if it exists, it will be tested.
There's no statute of limitations?
No, because when Rodney Ellis was in the Senate, he did this for people. He had this, even though there was mostly Republicans, he got a bipartisan group, Republicans and Democrats, to agree that people had a right to use DNA. He created this Chapter 64 of the Code of Criminal Procedure that allows people who've been to jail, been in prison for a long time, and there's still DNA preserved, to have it tested at the state's expense. With the new testing that can determine DNA matches. Because even if they tested it in 1984, it would have just had a blood type. Well, a lot of people have the same blood types. So that's what this statute is specifically for, and he championed that statute. So that, many people have been exonerated based on that statute.
Yes, ma'am.
And Rodney Ellis is the one that did that. So let me just read a little bit more, and then interrupt me whenever y'all want to. From that point on, Odomes, then an honorable discharged Army veteran with a check forgery conviction, would be the detective's main suspect. Yarborough showed a photo spread to the rape victim. She picked the third one, a mugshot of Odomes from his forgery case, so she already knew he'd been to jail before. At the time of the rape, Odomes didn't live in Houston, but rather in Center, Texas, a 3-hour drive to the east with his new wife, Josie, and their 2 young daughters. The family shared a home with Josie's uncle, Horton Hatcher. In May 1984, 3 months after the rape, the couple decided to move back to Houston to earn more money and live on their own. Among their neighbors was Wilkes, whom Josie describes as trouble from the first time I met him. He would drop by high on drugs and pocket their valuables. He was a thief, basically. He burglarized his own sister's apartment nearby, Odomes says, information he passed on to Wilkes' sister, angering Wilkes. There's another piece of information still preserved in Josie's memory. Wilkes often wore a green uniform from Trees of Houston, a landscaping business where he once worked, she says. She remembers it down to the yellow and green decal on the breast. During the second week of May, the police knocked on the door. Guns were drawn. My children are grabbing my legs and said, and I'm saying, put the guns down. I have 2 daughters here. Josie told them they had the wrong man because her husband wasn't living in Houston during the attack. The date was fixed in her memory because she remembers Hatcher picking Odomes up from work that morning after her uncle's birthday party. It sounds pretty good to me. I can see why people are frustrated. The police didn't buy it, and they let him off in handcuffs. So anyway, that's kind of the beginning of how it happened. I mean, the Denver Post did a good job of kind of laying it all down.
Can I ask you another question?
Of course.
How can we explain, some things are explainable. A police that's not on the up and up, a snitch snitching, that's not something unbelievable. But how do you get a lawyer
Wow.
who's representing someone when they know the stakes is as high as it is and see all this evidence laid out? And where is his oath to what he does for a living, the humanity part of it, that I'm representing this person and he know the stakes. If this guy, he's not taking a plea, that he can get a lot of time on my watch.
I can't answer that because I've never done that. So, and I can't speak for a lawyer. I've always subpoenaed the witnesses. So I can't tell you what happened. I can just present the case here so that we can look and learn from these experiences, because we hope in a civilized society that something like this doesn't happen again. And that's what my hope can be, that there's a fair side to both sides on this, and that a defense attorney does their job by subpoenaing all witnesses and testing all evidence. And I can just tell you the prosecution under Kim Ogg, since I've been back since 2017, we're not going to trial without evidence being tested. No one has to ask for it. We're going to do that. That's our duty.
Have you ever been around a colleague with showed that much incompetency in their profession as in your 30-year storied history of attorney?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I did when I did that is I would take those people under my wing and help them. And I missed a lot of hours and time in my family's life by, after I get off work, spending hours with people helping them with their case because they took money from somebody and didn't know how to handle that type of case. I've helped them try them. I've sat up with them and told them, do this is the next step. This is the next step. This is the next step, because they don't know. Because a lot of young lawyers will take the money, but they don't know how to try the case. You don't know how to try a case like this until you've tried one. So what I did as a young lawyer is I watched other people. If I had a trial coming up and I've never done it, I'd go spend a week watching a trial like that, so I understood the games that are going to be played.
Excuse me, just one more thing. These the yellow ones, I just want you to read that and then I'll be through showing you.
Okay, let me see what I'm reading from. Is this also, is this from a, okay, so this is also, I don't know if this is the same article, but it's another article from the Denver Post. Court records show that throughout the 1990s, space limits led Houston authorities to purge more than 200 rape kits, which contained multiple biological specimens, AKA DNA. It's outrageous, said Randy Schaefer, a defense lawyer who helped exonerate Byrd through DNA testing only because the kit from his case somehow survived a spring cleaning. What if any of the men on those cases wanted to test them to prove their innocence? Among the possible casualties, Donald Odomes, who we have sitting right here telling his story. He has spent 22 years of a 65-year sentence in a South Texas prison accused of raping a Houston woman, despite no physical evidence tying him to the crime. He was convicted using the same police procedures DNA has exposed as unreliable. Eyewitness testimony through a suggestive lineup and an informant who fingered him, but later said he lied under the police pressure. At least 3 family members say Odomes was with them 180 miles away at the time of the attack. We were in East Texas, his ex-wife, Josie Odomes, said of the day of the crime. That is the only thing that I know, and I stake my life on it. There's no ifs and maybes about it. Given DNA's ever-increasing truth-telling abilities, Holmes now concedes that he may have made a mistake by authorizing bulk disposals of rape kits throughout his 2 decades in office. It shouldn't be shit-canned, he said bluntly of DNA. It's easy to say with hindsight that I could have done it differently, but yes, I now have regrets. Wow, that's real deep. And that's former DA Johnny Holmes.
Are you familiar with him?
I worked for him from 1992 to 1995. When I was a DA the first time around.
It's not often that people in position admit fault and
Wow.
they made mistakes that affect people's lives.
And former Harris County District Attorney John Holmes, said the purges were solely attempts to free space in the absence of a state preservation law. So the law didn't require them to keep them, so they needed the space, and they got rid of them. In 1997, the clerk of Harris County, Texas, threw out 50 rape kits days after then Governor George W. Bush pardoned Houston's Kevin Byrd from a wrongful conviction exposed by DNA, and that's the one Randy Schaefer had done. If the implication is that destroyed evidence because they thought it would produce further exonerations, that is cause for great concern, said former U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno, now spearheading a national examination of evidence destruction through the American Judicature Society. So
Also, they pointed to what his point was, because of the case of exoneration in the evidence, they were saying, let's get rid of this evidence because it may free people that we convicted.
Yep, that's what it says. Some police departments overestimated the numbers of eligible samples by 1,217 cases. The memo shows more than 70 couldn't find the evidence or had destroyed it. Some said the evidence had deteriorated. Some solved their cases. Still others said they didn't have the staffing to search for evidence. After the Post obtained a copy of the memo, the CBI refused to talk about the cases or even evidence preservation generally in the state.
But look at it this side. Look who it also hurts. Look at the victims themselves, that people that got away with the crime, now that they're collecting DNA, they could have connected them to cold cases. So, where it could have exonerated people, it also could have closed and brought some peace to people that never got a chance to face their attacker. And I don't think they looked at it that way.
No. That's for the people who are hurt, the wrongfully accused. This is a terrible debate. And one of the things about truth and justice and the education of the criminal justice system, this educates us hopefully on how far we've come, that these type of mistakes, egregious as they are never made again. And I would not participate in a district attorney's office that did that. I mean, if it's done, it's not the policy. If somebody of all these DAs goes to court, but I just don't think anyone wants that, because now with all the laws being strong in the culture of prosecutors now, they know that DNA must be tested or we have Chapter 64. See, remember when this happened, there was no Chapter 64 to where, the law has changed completely. After Chapter 64, after a case is over, the DA has to give you a piece of paper required by law to say, we're destroying the evidence unless you ask for it to be preserved within the next 180 days. And every lawyer in a case that has biological evidence is going to ask that it be preserved, because you never know in the future when technology might get better. I mean, we have technology at this point. They're working on what's becoming popular now is touch DNA. And that's going to be the next revolution, to where if, I've never invited you to my house, but there's been a burglary, and now all the DNA of people who've been to jail is in the system, including people who work in law enforcement. They'll be able to tell by touch if somebody touched something. And it's right now it's fingerprint, but this is touch DNA. So that's like the new That's what's being worked on. It's being used. It's not used widely at this time because they're still working on it. But that's the new evolution of DNA. Whether somebody was to solve burglaries, because burglaries are really unsolved crimes, I mean, unless somebody sees them or there's a camera.
Is Chapter 64 only limited to the state of Texas, or do we have something similar to that in other states?
This is a Texas law, so you can Google it. Just Google Code of Criminal Procedure, Chapter 64 on DNA, and it'll pop up on Google, and you can read the whole chapter. The portion that I was reading about Janet Reno championing it around the country was that she was working on this nationwide. It can be a congressional law. The problem is anything in D.C. is having to do with federal law. It's not state. States make their own law, and then federal makes law. So because he wasn't prosecuted in federal court, it's got to be under a state. So that's the difference, and that's the educational piece of it. If you're charged with a federal crime, then you go to the federal laws for it. So the federals don't have anything to do with this. The only time the feds can get involved in something is if they feel like it's unconstitutional. Then it can make its way up to the Supreme Court. And when it's unconstitutional in a case, it's because Texas might be doing it one way and Mississippi doing it another way. And when the jurisdictions don't agree on what the death penalty is or what the criteria are for killing someone, or if it's cruel and unusual punishment, then when the laws don't agree and it seems like it's unfair, then it can go up for the Supreme Court to decide this is the procedure in which you kill somebody, or you can't. But generally, laws are local. So it was a local law.
So Donald, besides being here today telling your story, what are you working on today that's addressing this besides just telling your story today?
Well, I have did my best to get in contact with a lot of people, and I would question them about, they had the Rodney Ellis that like she said about Rodney Ellis, he had told them, and the guy Wilkins that was in Dallas, he was letting a lot of people out, and he made a law that says...
Craig Watkins.
Yeah, Watkins. Yes,
it was the DA of Dallas County, Craig Watkins. When he got elected in 2008 with Barack Obama, he created kind of like an Innocence project inside the district attorney's office. So anybody that had been convicted out of Dallas County, inmates could write to there, and they would actually review their cases. And if there was DNA involved under Chapter 64, they could ask for their DNA to be tested. Harris County did the same thing. So when I was a defense attorney, if people asked to be looked at the DNA, a judge would write the judge, and then the judge would appoint a defense attorney to look for the DNA and test it if we could find it. There's been some that there was one case that I worked on that we found the DNA, it was tested, and it wasn't the guy, and the judge still wouldn't let him out.
And let me share this with y'all.
I know, it's crazy. That's
share
crazy.
this with y'all, sir.
That's why I do a show like this. It's crazy.
No, it's okay. I got a chance to talk with Mr. Rodney Ellis. He used to come through the neighborhood. Oh, he used to come through the neighborhood.
Since you've been out?
Yes. My nephew used to wash his car for him, and I had a cup from him and everything. But this is what he did. He told them, for every person that y'all put in this prison that was innocent, you're going to give them $80,000 a year for every year they was locked up. And you're going to give them a punitive wage every month for the time that they did. Now, that law should still be standing.
It is, but the problem is the prosecutor has to agree that the person was actually innocent. So a lot of times, if you're let out, they won't say that you're actually innocent. That's what's going on with Alfred Brown. Alfred Brown is out, but the prosecutor dismissed the case. That was Devin Anderson before Kim got there, but she would make a finding on whether he was innocent or not.
Oh, wow.
And the law says that the prosecutor who's in office that dismisses the case has to make that determination, not the new one.
Is that vanilla? I mean, they got it where that's like, if I don't say it...
Just say you understand what I said.
Okay.
If you understand what I said, you understand the law. If you want to change it, you need to run to be a representative, because that's what the law is.
Or create a bill that opposes that or
Legislators
changes
do
it.
that. But that's what legislators do.
All right.
They write bills.
Yeah.
And so don't quibble with me. One of the hardest things about being a defense attorney is I'll tell them the law, and people say, well, that's not it. So-and-so got so-and-so. Well, that's why I'm here. I'm telling you the law. Now, if you don't like it, then that's when you talk to your representative. You don't hug them, shake their hand, be all glorified by them. You talk to them about the laws that they're making or not making. That's what you do with them. But instead, people say, oh, so-and-so's here, so-and-so's here. Well, why don't you talk to them about the stuff you tell me is not the truth when I'm telling you what I'm reading in the book that they wrote. I didn't write it. I'm a lawyer just telling you what they wrote.
And this what else hurt me. the Silver Court downtown, right? I had already wrote up me something, and I sent that to them concerning what they had done. Chuck Rosenthal, John Holmes, and Frank Rush. It wasn't 3 days till he wrote me back, and I've been still looking. I got that letter somewhere in my closet. I need to find it. He says, "You don't get nothing from Frank Rush. You don't get nothing from John Holmes, and you don't get nothing from the man in the lab." I say, "Wow," and this is what he said, because I had filed a suit on them.
Well, let me just tell you this. The only way that you can get it under the law is that the DNA has to be there, it has to exonerate you, and a judge has to say that you're actually innocent.
Oh, okay.
So those are the steps. That's what the law says. If you can go through the process and the DNA exonerates you, and a court exonerates you, then because of all the years you spent in prison when you shouldn't have been there, and the DA has declared you actually innocent, then you get the money.
Well, I was
So if
really...
you can get your case dismissed after the time, but if you're not declared actually innocent by the prosecutor who's reinvestigating that case, then that's what's in the law. And so no one has ever said you were actually innocent. Nobody's ever tested your even tested the DNA. So you're not entitled to the money. So that was a true representation of the law that was sent to you.
And the way I told them, the way I wrote it, I let them know that my civil rights had been violated.
Right.
Now, I wrote the ACLU about that.
Right.
But the ACLU have gotten to it. They used to be, okay, we're going to look into this, and see, can we come to some kind of statute or something on this to see what's really happening. Right. But then they never do it.
I mean, like I said, the only vehicle you have, and it was only written when Chapter 64 was there, is to retest the DNA. There is nothing else. Okay. Unless Mr. Wilkes confesses that he did it, or the lady confesses that she knows she made a mistake and it wasn't you.
Ain't nobody never got in touch with her.
But I'm just telling you, she said it was you then, she's going to always say it was you. I'm just saying.
That's true.
The only time there have been cases where people have recanted if there were little children that said it and they know that their daddy didn't rape them, and so they know they lied on them. But strangers don't recant because you are blazed into their memory because, like you said, the police have shown your picture over and over. So when people experience trauma, it's been told that they don't have a good memory of what's going on because they're trying to live. They might be flashing back, thinking about their children. This experience is about to kill me. So their protective mechanisms come in. So they're not really focusing on the person. And so that's why eyewitness identification has never been completely good if people are being traumatized. Like you said, you know how they say your life flashes in front of you. So if your life is flashing in front of you and somebody's doing something to you, how can you focus on your memory is not being occupied by facial features or height or anything. So that's why the descriptions are usually vague and not actually accurate. And so cops have a big responsibility of not trying to put memories in people's minds that were going through a trauma and a shock. But I think your case is a tough, terrible case. But without that DNA, there is no legal vehicle to get there.
Yes, I know.
And there's a lot of people. It's a lot of people in your situation that the DNA was destroyed. Just think of like what Randy Schaefer said about how many people's DNA was thrown away.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're alone. It's bad though, but the good news is there's DNA now. And the good news is we test it no matter how long it takes. Someone might have to stay in jail a long time until it gets tested, but there's not going to be a trial in Harris County when there's DNA evidence and it's not tested for a DNA match. It just doesn't happen anymore. In Johnny Holmes' day, when he was a DA, DNA couldn't exclude people. It wasn't sophisticated enough to match people. So any other thought? Now, we were supposed to spend this hour talking about life inside the prison, and we've done 50 minutes, and we're still not getting there. So, because your case was so interesting in that the Denver Post wrote such an extensive article about it is amazing, and that Barry Scheck's office actually kept it for 2 years, trying without hope. And it seems like Barry Scheck's office came down from New York, and they went through all the lab and all of the evidence. It seems like the Denver Post came down and they went through all of the documents. So you should feel good that people cared enough to actually go look through it.
They believed you.
They believed
you.
They
did.
They believed your story.
Because I've never heard of that happening.
I really admire them for that. Yes, I did.
I
got a chance to talk with them.
And it looked, yeah.
They did my interviews, and they come away from the Wow. See, I
Denver, or you?
Yeah, they come away from Denver to do
Colorado.
this interview on me. And when they got through doing the interview, I was on Darrington then. We did it inside, see me behind the bars, and I was showing them the pictures of my daughter, but they did them behind the bars. And on my way back to my cell, the warden and 2-3 dudes was at the desk. And he said, come here. I said, yes, sir. What Denver Post got to do with Houston? I said, didn't you let them in, sir? Yeah, I let them in. I'm asking you a question. I said, why you didn't ask them that? You let them in.
Yeah, you didn't know they were coming.
No, I didn't. But he let them in. But he gonna ask me what they got to do with Houston. I said, why you didn't ask them? You let them in here. Get down there before I lock you up. I said, don't threaten me. Lock me up, sir. You can lock me up. Don't threaten me, though. You can lock me up. Okay, if that's what you're gonna do, do that. Don't tell me what you're gonna do. Do it. All right, you just get on down the highway. You should have never stopped me then. Yeah, I guess I was just, you put me somewhere I'm supposed to be. I wasn't frustrated. I was somewhere where I know I wasn't supposed to be at. And I was really upset with that for a while. I had to get used to just letting myself relax. Man, don't get yourself in no more than, don't get yourself in something that you did, and that's gonna make it worse. So right. I started checking myself, looking at myself, going to the church, meeting a lot of people, and Mr. Ed Hudson was one of the greatest men I met. They have a class in there, and they come, and he was really a nice fellow, man. And he let me know, Mr. Odomes, I'm with you 100%. He said, I wish I could do more for you, but they won't allow us to do that.
And who was he, just a civilian that volunteers?
Yes, he come to the church, and they do the, what you call it in the church when they teach you lessons.
Bible study?
Yeah, they do Bible study. And he was out of Pasadena.
Have you ever tried to reach out to him since you've been out?
Well, no, he gave me a Bible that I could have, and I've been having it ever since I left.
So he would come from Pasadena, Texas?
Yes, and come all the way to
Darrington
to the, yes, ma'am.
And you haven't tried to talk to him and tell him you're out?
I can't get in. I don't know if Mr. Hudson is still, but he told me this. He went to his church, and he told the church about me, and he was just telling them this. But they took up a big old savings. I don't know how much it was, but however much it was, it had to go in a 2-ton truck. He took it over there to my wife.
Wow.
Yes, he did. He took that over there to my wife. She got everything she needed. And she told them to give some of these people some. I got enough right now, so you can give them some of this. And
what people are those?
The people that we stayed in the projects. Okay. She didn't get all the stuff herself. She gave them some.
Oh, so they took up like toys and
Well,
bikes.
I used to write for their toys, my daughters, because every year they give you a paper. And this lady come looking for me. And everybody come telling me, say, Odom, it's a lady down there in the church looking for you, man. I say, what's she looking for me? What lady? We don't know, man. She asked me about Donald Odomes. And sure enough, I went down there, and when I walked in there, and I said, excuse me, ma'am, are you looking for Donald Odomes? She said, yes, sit down. She said, ever since you've been here at this prison, you have not missed 1 year of sending your daughters presents, because they buy the presents from them, and they
That's
take
an Angel Tree program.
Yes, it would. That's the name of it, Mrs. Sneed, Angel Tree. She said, you have not missed not 1 year of sending them something, and I admire you for that. Yes, I do. And that's how I got to meet her. She said, sit down with me a while. Let me talk to you. Everybody doesn't do that. I look for a lot of papers in there, and I see your name every year while you sending your daughters this. You tell me their ages, how old they are, and I take them what they like. I give them books to read, and I give them clothing, and yeah, it was nice. So I kind of learned how to lay back and kind of just let things flow. And if I didn't like it, I'd kind of move away from it, so that was me. So everything kind of hurt me a lot, a long time. Took me a lot to get loose from losing so many family.
Oh, I know it.
But I finally kind of got a little used to it. But I never got used to the place. I got used to just doing what I shouldn't do. Like, say, walk down the hallway when I ain't supposed to go, or go out the door when I ain't supposed to go. So I learned that. I said, well, okay, this is how I'm going to have to do this. And I mostly liked to be by myself. So it was kind of good that way. You got a bunch of heads, and they just, oh, man, they just, wow.
Right. You survived by just kind of being alone.
Yes, ma'am. It was so messy. And now I'm talking about, everybody had a gang member. Everybody joined a game. Everybody got a game. Why? What is this y'all doing, man? Oof. And this was a terrible place to be at Darrington, because Darrington was one of the worst places in Texas to be at.
Earlier, we had a conversation about how you saw the transition of the Texas prison system from turnkeys, where inmates basically ran
We
the
have 2
prison.
minutes,
They
so we're
did.
going to have to continue
Yeah.
this sometime in 2019. So, Danny, I'm going to let you, who wants to go first? We got 2 minutes, so y'all can have some closing remarks or closing statements. Would you like to go first, Mr. Odomes?
Yes, ma'am. My closing statement, I want to thank y'all very much for having me here on y'all show. I want to thank y'all very much that I hope someone out there listening can see my point of view and understand that don't never lose. Don't never give up. Don't never give up on what you believe in. And if you did something, at least own up to it. And that way you know in your soul and in your heart that you were right for what you did. So don't do anything that's going to oppose you to putting yourself out there. And I used to tell all the fellas before I left, they used to tell me, Odom, man, if I was you, I wouldn't go to the fields, man. I said, you ain't me, though. I'm going because I want to go. I said, when I get out there, if I decide I want to change my mind, I'm going to do that.
So out in the field and work.
Ma'am?
They didn't want you to go out in the field and work?
Yeah, they said if they was in my shoes, they knew my case. They said if we was in your shoes, we wouldn't go out there, Odom, man. They'd lock me up, man. I wouldn't go out there. I said, that's you, man. I said, I'm going to do me. You do you, I'm going to do me.
Thank you, Mr. Odomes, for having the courage to tell your story. It's heart-wrenching, but these are stories that need to be told. Danny, you have about 45 seconds.
Okay. Elections have consequences, and the one that we just recently had consequences in the state of Florida. For the first time in the history of Florida, people with felony convictions that are no longer on parole or probation will be able to vote. And that was through the Proposition 4 that was just passed. Here in Texas, it was in 1997 under George Bush that we were able to vote.
May I correct you?
Okay.
You could vote ever since I've been a lawyer, and I've been a lawyer since I was in law school in '89. There used to be a 2-year waiting period, but Texas has been. Ex-cons could always vote. So when you got off parole, you couldn't vote the next day. You had to wait 2 years from the day you were off parole.
Okay.
That's the way it was in all of the '80s, '90s until it was amended to be immediately the next day. So Texas has always had.
So
that.
there was no longer two-year wait in Texas.
Yeah, no longer the 2-year wait. That's the amendment that happened. And George Bush didn't do it. The legislators did it. The state Senate approved it, and he signed it. So remember, we give too much credit to.
I said under him.
You're right, but I just want, because people don't understand the process, we need to talk about the process.
Okay.
A bill was introduced by, I believe, Harold Dutton, or it might have been, and then it was, but he signed it. He didn't veto it. Okay, so, but felons has been able to vote all of the 80s that I know. I don't know when that started, but it was a 2-year wait. All right, so that's the correction, and that is why we educate you about the criminal justice system in Harris County. Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. Good night.